Good Saturday afternoon, everybody. Rob O'Connor here from RobVinoSports.com. We are here on a championship Saturday. Going to break down some of the big conference tournament championship games that are on tap for this evening. Pac-12, Big 12, Big East, ACC, maybe a few more. To do all that, I need to bring in the founder of RobVinoSports.com, none other than Rob Vino himself. Rob, how are you this afternoon?
Hey, I'm doing great today, Rob. How about you?
Doing well. It's been a fun couple of days so far as we've gone through the quarterfinals, the semifinals in some of these tournaments, and now we're left with the last couple of teams standing from some of these major conferences, and we got a lot of big basketball games tonight, seeding on the line, maybe some number one seeds, depending on who you talk to. But let's jump right into it, and we'll start with the earliest of the major conference championship games. We're going to go West Virginia, Kansas. That's a 6 o'clock tip-off. Right now, West Virginia about a 1.5-point favorite. Total bet down from as high as 153.5 down to about 150 right now. Kansas, a little bit of the injury bug here. West Virginia playing well. What do you see tonight?
Yeah, it is interesting, Rob, that Kansas has, without their big guy, gone to the four-guard offense, and it's produced a couple of games in the last 2 days where 150 total points were scored against Oklahoma State. I think that one was 82-68, and then they came back last night with the 83-67 win over K-State. Didn't get there last night with the total, but I was there in the Oklahoma State game with over 149, barely made it by 1 point. Just the thought process with this team, with the four-guard offense, and they've been small all season long, really, even with Uzburke in there. When you don't have anybody to protect the rim, it generally allows the other team, if they have any guard play whatsoever, to get to the rim, to go get fouled or get buckets. That was kind of the premise for the Oklahoma State total being bet over on my case. I think that, West Virginia and the pressing style that they play could give KU a few more problems tonight. These formats are so different than what these kids play all season long, and even what they'll play in the NCAA, NIT, whatever postseason tournament they play in. And when you have to play back-to-back, and you're going four guards, and you're going to face a West Virginia press, you just wonder. We saw it last night a little bit, Rob, and to a lesser extent, I understand the talent level is not the same, but New Mexico under head coach Paul Weir just pressed Utah State right out of the building in the first half. Teams get worn down, and teams like West Virginia and New Mexico, who are accustomed to this style and have the stamina, don't get worn down. So we've seen a line movement, as you mentioned, toward the West Virginia side in this game. I can understand money going that way. Totals also come way down. We were talking off air a little bit. 24 games on board today, or on the bettable board today, and all 24 games played toward the under, just a mechanical movement by big money bettors at this time of season. We've seen nothing but under money for the most part over the course of the last 4 days.
Do you think that Vegas sets these totals a little low to begin with, knowing that this under money is going to come in, or do they set them at where they think it should be?
Yeah, it's funny because Las Vegas really doesn't even set them anymore. For those who, use the Ken Pomeroy site, KenPom.com, he basically is the totals market from November through April. Odds makers go right to Ken Pom's site and see what he's got for a predicted final score, and boom, there's your total thrown up on the board, and then they let the money move it from there. So the reality is, if you're playing openers, you're betting against Ken Pom, and then once the money starts moving things, and like I said earlier, in the case of conference tournament action, it's just a mechanical play where the theory behind it all is, Rob, that in a lot of cases it's the third time around, to face a conference opponent, so everybody knows every single play the other guy's going to run. So, of course, it would be more difficult to score. Games tighten up, teams tighten up because there's so much on the line. So, of course, possessions would be longer. This is just when I say, of course, this is their theory behind it. And so they chop at least 2 points off almost every game. In some cases, we've seen 8, 9. Today we see 10 in the Houston-Wichita State game taken off the total. And that's just the way it goes. But oddsmakers really not setting totals in college basketball anymore. That's really KenPom's market. And the good news for those of us who like to play totals is that, KenPom has his projected final scores in advance. So you can go during the season to the next day's games and already know basically what the total is going to be. The only caveat to that right there would be if there's a major injury in the game. Obviously, odds makers take that into consideration, where KenPom and the computer numbers don't take injuries or any external situational factors into the numbers. Those are just mathematical deals. So that's what you're up against. I don't think odds makers change anything from what they do all season long, and they let the market control it.
I mean, if you look at their 2 regular season meetings, you have Kansas winning both matchups. They won at home 71-66 back in January, and then they went Kansas won on the road at West Virginia 71-66, and then at home they beat West Virginia 77-69 in February, less than a month ago. So you're right, it's the third time for these guys playing each other, and I think that the fact that Kansas is on a back-to-back situation, and the fact that they are down one of their key players, probably took this line from a Kansas -2, -3 into West Virginia small favorite territory.
Yeah, and of course, the double revenge factor does come into play there with WVA. Hey, these two teams have played a lot over the course of the last 2 seasons as the top 2 teams in this particular conference. So a lot of familiarity there. It usually comes down to, in this case, or in any case where West Virginia is concerned, Rob, West Virginia makes shots or shoots at a reasonable percentage. Let's put it that way, because making shots is a very vague term. But if they shoot at a reasonable percentage, 45, 46%, they're going to win a lot of games because they get extra possessions off the steals and whatnot, and they get fouled an awful lot. So we'll see how they shoot tonight. We'll see if tired legs prevail, which I know the under money thinks will happen in these semifinal and final round games when you're playing for the third time in 3 days. But kids are also accustomed to the rims at these neutral venues by that point in time. So a lot of factors that go in. I think you and I, as we talked earlier, have had success to an extent over the past 4 days by allowing the market to take huge chunks out of the total and then coming back with overplays of our own. And it's been a fairly successful deal for guys who play middles. They've made a little bit of money playing some middles these last 4 days as well.
Let's jump ahead to the Big East Championship game. Providence, Villanova, big number hung out on this one. Nova currently favored by about 13 points. And you look at this, and Nova won by 20 at home, lost by 5 on the road. And when they lost by 5, they shot 3 of 20 from deep. And that is not typical Villanova basketball. So I think that Providence has a lot of momentum. Great win against Xavier last night. Big comeback, down 17 points. Played an overtime game. Probably takes a lot out of you to have to come back the next night and guard a Villanova team that's absolutely deadly from the perimeter and can work it inside just as well.
Yeah, and then take into account, Rob, that Providence played an overtime game the night before that. They're on back-to-back overtime games. Defeat Creighton in OT, defeat Xavier in OT. Basically now they have played 5.5 halves, and now you're going to face Villanova. In this particular instance, we'll see how the first half goes, because I feel like teams, and we saw it a little bit out of Georgia against Kentucky yesterday, Rob. Teams that are a bit fatigued can run on emotion for a half, but the second half is usually where it shows up. And in yesterday's second half, Kentucky pulled away from Georgia. Would not be surprised to see the same thing here if Providence comes out with a lot of emotion, a lot of intensity. Eventually that's going to wear off. In my case, I'm hopeful that the game is relatively close after one half, and then we can step in and play Villanova's second half, because I think that's where they'll really take advantage of this tired Providence team. Nonetheless, as you mentioned, 2 great wins for Ed Cooley's squad, probably puts them into the tournament now, but who knows? This bubble has been so fluid. It's almost like every 10 minutes the teams that are in and the teams that are out change. So I'm not going to get into trying to predict who the 16-team field is going to be. We'll see that tomorrow. But for Providence, 2 big wins. Nova's so efficient offensively, Rob. You just look at what they've done in the first 2 games inside this tournament. And last night, 41% from three-point range. The night before against Marquette, 52% from three-point range. They've got 29 three-pointers in 2 games. Just tough to defend all around. And I think, at some point in this game, Villanova is going to pull away. And I'm hopeful to get a pretty good number for second half, because I think that's really where Villanova is going to dominate here.
Well, I think Villanova is clearly the better team. I don't think that Providence can count on holding Villanova to 23 points and a half like they did in the first meeting. Villanova's played well at the Garden. They took care of Butler before the game barely started last night, up 19-0, and really never looked back from there, never let Butler even get it too close. So I look at Villanova to just keep rolling. They didn't win the Big East regular season outright this year. They're still projected to be a number 1 seed, and I think it would mean a lot for Jay Wright and this group to win the Big East tournament this year.
Yeah, number 1 seed coming for them. Whether or not it becomes the number 1 overall, we'll find out. I think a lot of that will have to do with what happens to Virginia against North Carolina this evening. But, yeah, I know that during the course of the days, you and I message back and forth a little bit, and I can't get over how efficient the Villanova offense is. I comment on that a lot between you, myself, and Derek Davis, our other guy here at Rob Vino Sports. The fact that they can come down, and they don't even play with tempo or a huge fast tempo. But boy, oh boy, they are so efficient, and they get good shots, and they make shots, and it's really what separates them from a lot of teams across the country that are in that, top 12, so to speak. I just don't know how a team like Providence comes out here and defeats them tonight. I know the number looks huge, 13, but Villanova, now that they're healthy, they're more than capable of putting people away, especially teams that are in the fatigue situation that Providence is in. They're more than capable of putting a team like that away.
I agree here. I mean, as someone who follows Villanova quite closely, the big number does not scare me at all tonight. So we will just see how it plays out. You're right, close at the half. Could be a great opportunity for a second half play in that one. Let's move on to the ACC championship game. We talked a little bit about some of these teams at number 1 seeds, number 1 overall. Virginia, UNC, big matchup. Any chance with a UNC win over Virginia, they could come up and take one of those number 1 seeds, maybe away from Xavier, who lost in the semifinals of the Big East tournament, and you go back to a couple years ago when Villanova won it all. They lost in the finals of the Big East tournament and got punished, moved down from a 1 to a 2. Xavier's kind of been consistently on that one line. Maybe they get punished and UNC could move up. What do you think?
Yeah, anything's possible, right, Rob? I can only speak from the way that we view games as handicappers and bettors, and in my case, I keep pretty rigid power ratings so that I can set numbers a day ahead of time and then see where the odds maker comes with the point spread. If you were to ask me how power ratings consider the top 4, I wouldn't have Xavier as a number 1 seed. North Carolina would be, as I look at it now, they would sit 5th, so an obvious opportunity for them if somebody like Kansas loses tonight. I don't think Virginia's going to come off the one line if they lose, but certainly wins back-to-back over Duke and Virginia, raise the UNC power rating, and what was already a high one becomes an even higher one. So I think in the eyes of Las Vegas people, of sports bettors, of odds makers, of handicappers and bettors, UNC certainly could be a number 1 seed. It just doesn't work that way, though, when you're dealing with the committee and their set of rules and the various bracketologists that you see on TV. They seem to view things a totally different way than we do. So it's hard to guess. But the way they're playing right now, Rob, they have the look of a number 1 seed, and we'll see if that continues tonight, because this is a Virginia team that frustrates opposing offenses, certainly with their style, their methodical play on offense, and then the way that they set up on defense. If you don't fast break this team, which is really difficult to do, I mean, it's easy to say, it's almost impossible to do, but if you don't get points early in a possession, your chances of getting points at all aren't very good against Virginia. The total here in this game tonight, speaking of games that have been bet down total-wise, opened 131. We're now staring at 125.5 on average across some offshores and Las Vegas houses. UNC in this tournament so far played 3 games, all 3 under the total. Could we be looking at 4 straight unders with a North Carolina team whose perception is of that of a high-scoring team, and a team which obviously Roy Williams encourages to play at a high pace, high-octane style or tempo? So it's certainly a contrasting style here. Game has been bet down. Virginia 4.5 down to 3.5. Over the last couple of years, we've seen these things go both ways. Where UNC and Virginia are concerned, I think you could, sit here and argue both ways here tonight. It's a tough game for me to read, but that early number of 4.5, Rob, seems a little high in a game like this to me, especially if you're just doing correlation parlay style wagering. When you have a total of 125.5, and a game that's set at 4.5, it almost tells you that it's going to be a extremely close in the 50 style game. So I don't know. If I had to look, I'd probably look towards taking the points here. But Virginia's just a tough team for anybody to crack with Jerome and Guy. They've got great guard play. Difficult team, Virginia. We'll see how North Carolina handles them tonight. As we speak here, Rob, I'm analyzing this North Carolina game and looking at a couple of monitors in my office here. Number 1 seed Vermont out of the America East just was upset by a 3-pointer with 0.5 left in the game. So Maryland-Baltimore County punches a ticket into the NCAA tournament. I don't know how many teams that is now, but they're going to be one of them. The celebration goes on for UMBC.
And I imagine they'll probably be a 16 seed.
They'll be in that play-in game for sure.
So you look at the matchup in the regular season between Virginia and UNC. It was a low-scoring game, 61-49. Virginia all the way back in early January. These teams met once, didn't play again during the regular season. I lean ever so slightly towards taking the points. I think the motivation might be there just a bit more for UNC. If they think there's a chance they can get a one line with a win, I think that Virginia is safe regardless. Of course, they want to win the game, but I don't think that the motivation is going to be as great for them as UNC. They want to kind of avenge that earlier loss to Virginia. And haven't played it yet, but if I do, I'd probably play it with the points.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think that in that particular game, when UNC, we talked a little bit about the Virginia defense, but let's just point out that, when North Carolina is in an open floor game, they do tend to give up a lot of points. But when you put them in this style, half court versus half court, they can be extremely tough defensively as well. And things could be hard to come by for the Virginia Cavaliers in this game. North Carolina with a bit of a height advantage here, not the type of height advantage that they've had in the past, certainly, because they've had much bigger teams in recent memory than they have this year. So Virginia matches up a little bit better this season than they have in the past. But North Carolina can be a good defensive team. And if motivated, which we know they will be tonight, it could be a difficult game for Virginia. But you just can't overlook 19-1 inside the ACC, which was the record that Virginia put up this year. Outstanding basketball team. If I had to make a play, I'd probably play North Carolina plus the points.
Let's go out west. Arizona USC in the Pac-12 championship, one of the latest games of the evening to tip off. There's a few after it, but the last of the big games, so to speak. Right now, Arizona about a 3.5-point favorite with a total of 144. A lot of turmoil around this Arizona program in the last 3 or 4 weeks. They could pull it all back together, though, with a Pac-12 championship tonight. What do you think?
Yeah, well, certainly that's, been the rallying cry for this Arizona team. I think it's very easy to use that us against the world mentality with college teams. We see it a lot, Rob, where, I'm sure Sean Miller is in that locker room and the kids are defending him and he's telling them that everybody's out to get them. And, you run out on the floor, and to Arizona's credit, they're playing their best basketball of the season right now. UCLA played a tremendous game last night. Aaron Holiday and company, Thomas Welsh, those guys took Arizona to overtime. But in overtime, Arizona flexed their muscles. They come up with an 11-0 overtime verdict, which gave them the big win and cover. Once again, overtime not meant for underdogs, as the underdog plays to a tie at the end of regulation and winds up having their ticket ripped up at the end of OT. For Arizona, it's a great game. If you just want to stare at singular matchups in this contest, how about Chimezie Metu in the paint for USC against DeAndre Ayton for Arizona, who is now mostly regarded as the number one pick in the NBA drafts. You have Metu and Ayton in the pivot going head-to-head here. I think if you're Metu, he's a fiery player to begin with, very expressive. You're probably a little bit tired of hearing the last couple of weeks about Ayton. So I think there'll be a chip on his shoulder. Jordan McLaughlin, senior guard, lead guard for USC, obviously, against Alonzo Trier. There's real good matchups in this game. For me, I think that Arizona's a bit deeper than USC, although Andy Enfeld has gotten a lot of mileage out of this USC team from a defensive standpoint. I don't think they get enough credit as to how well they've played defense this year, and they've suffered some major losses personnel-wise throughout the year and been able to overcome them to get to this point, championship game of the Pac-12. All that being said, I do feel like Arizona's the better team. I feel like in the end Arizona can cover this number. And Oregon last night, Rob, had come into that game against USC shooting absolutely miserably in their two prior games, but somehow escaping both with victories. I thought for sure last night at Oregon, with the talent that they have offensively, would shoot a little better than the percentages they had put up the two nights before, but it really didn't happen. USC stifled them one more time, so again, that's a little credit to the USC defense. This game should be a little more free-flowing, but once again, number's been bet down as far as total is concerned. So if you want to hop in with some take back right now, we see this number bet down from 147 to 144, and in a couple of places, 143.5. By the time it tips off, may see even lower. I like Arizona in that game. They've moved from a 3 to 3.5 point favorite.
Well, Rob, we are up on Selection Sunday tomorrow. Forget the automatic bids. What do the power rankings say are the last 4 in?
Good question. Let me get that for you, buddy. The last 4 in, if we eliminate the mid-majors that get the automatic bid, my last 4 in at this point in time looks like it would be Arizona State, Oklahoma State. Providence now has a power rating high enough to get in. And then I've got a tie power ratings-wise with 4 teams. So it would be difficult to call. Of those teams, Alabama is 1, and they have an opportunity today against Kentucky, the game that's going on right now as we speak. So Alabama has a chance to play their way in, at least as far as power ratings are concerned. Again, these are not numbers that are used by the committee, numbers that are used by, guys that are trying to make point spreads on games. So I think they're a little more accurate, but those would be the last 4 in, or at least the last 3 in, with Alabama having an opportunity to be the 4th one in.
It'd be very interesting to see what the selection committee does tomorrow. I think it's a lot of the games we just talked about. I mean, Providence kind of right there on the bubble, but I think that it's a lot more of these teams playing for seedings tonight than they are playing for bids into the field of 68. Let's do one more here. Let's take a look at the Mountain West title game. You've got San Diego State absolutely crushing Nevada last night, and you got them going up against New Mexico, 6 o'clock in the East tip, which actually turns out to be a pretty quick turnaround for these guys who didn't finish playing, especially New Mexico, until well after midnight in the East last night.
Yeah, and again, that's a team that I probably wouldn't worry too much about, Rob, because they're conditioned for it. The style that Paul Weir has brought to Albuquerque is one of, 40 minutes, 94 feet, press. And his kids don't seem to wear out, and he's got a really deep bench. So he just keeps whirling them in and out, and they keep on coming after you. It's interesting, the other side of the coin, the San Diego State side, you've come so accustomed to Steve Fisher being there and San Diego State being one of those Virginia-like teams that's methodical, wins on half-court offense and defense, wins ugly 55-52 style games. His longtime assistant, Brian Dutcher, who goes all the way back to the Fab 5 days with Steve Fisher, comes in and totally turns that around. They like to run as much as anybody. Now he's turned them into a 94-foot team. We saw 90 points put up by San Diego State last night. Dutcher was a little bit frustrated the night before that he couldn't get his horses out to run in a tight game. But against New Mexico, he's not going to have to worry about that. Again, this is a game, Rob, where the styles tell you nobody really wants to play slow, yet the total has been bet under tremendously, gone down from 155 all the way to 149.5. And the 4-point spread with San Diego State being favored indicates that at the end of the game, you'll be in that, let's say, 4 to 9 point range where fouling occurs inside the last 60, 90 seconds by the team that's trailing, and you wind up getting a lot of cheap points. So it could be a game where you can step in and take advantage of the low number right now, 149.5. I'll say this. I saw Brian Dutcher interviewed about 2 weeks ago, maybe a little less, maybe 10 days ago after a victory, where he said that he felt like his team was clicking on all cylinders right now, which is what every coach would love to have happen for their team. To me, it's been all due to the return of Trey Kell to that lineup. They missed him for a few games, but since he's come back, they've been about unbeatable. They've beaten Nevada not just once last night, but twice inside the last 7 days. So this is a conference where at-large teams were praying for Nevada to win, so there wouldn't be a bid stolen. Nevada doesn't win this conference tournament. They're going to go to the tournament, so now the Mountain West becomes a two-bid league. We'll see which one of these two goes. San Diego State's got the better talent. New Mexico's got a great system, and they can beat you if they can turn you over. But I just don't know, with the guard play that San Diego State has, if they'll be able to turn this team over. Should be a very entertaining game. And like I say, the money bet's under for the heck of it at this time of year, and maybe this is a good spot to play over 149.5.
I will be. I've been playing overs in the Mountain West tournament pretty much all weekend, and I just see this as a situation where you said 4 to 9 points. I mean, with how quickly these teams can score, it could be a 12, 15-point game with 2 minutes left, and they're going to just foul and try and get more possessions and see if they can get it to 10 with a minute to go, and then who knows what might happen. But I don't think this will be a blowout either way, and as long as the game stays relatively close and these teams play the pace that they like to play at, I think that this one could get over quite comfortably.
Yeah, and certainly, Rob, the familiarity with this court. It is a neutral, but the Thomas and Mack Center is a place, where both these teams play each and every year when they come to visit UNLV. So obviously there's not a difficulty where the venue is concerned. I agree with you. I think that even though the Mountain West totals during the conference tournament don't show it, because of the 9 games, 6 have gone under, but I think a lot of that's due to matchups where you have teams like Utah State, San Jose State, et cetera. A lot of those matchups didn't really, breed overplays, but this one does. These are two teams that want to go get you, and I just feel like if they make a decent amount of shots, you can never predict some of the stuff that happens in these games. For instance, yesterday I had an overplay on Auburn, Alabama over 151.5. King falls short. It hits 144, misses by 8 points to cash my ticket. But that 144 includes an 11-plus minute field goal-less streak by Auburn. Auburn, a team that averages 83, 84 points a game, doesn't make a basket for over 11 minutes in that contest, and still they come within 8 points of getting over the number. You can't predict 11-minute scoreless stretches from one of your highest-scoring teams in the nation. Both of these teams put points on the board. To me, that's about the only thing that would stop this game from not going 75 aside.
Well, Rob, we've touched on a bunch, and we got a big night tomorrow night. Hopefully we can touch base at some point and talk a little bit about it. And the other thing I think that I absolutely, and I saw the article up on RobVinoSports.com, but I think it warrants a podcast if time permits, is the new format for the NIT tournament this year. I'd love to talk about that with you for 20, 30 minutes. There's quite a few rule changes that could most certainly have an impact on totals at the very least.
Yeah, and all these parts beginning, right now we're beginning with the selection show. They move so quickly, Rob, so everything is time constrained. I think we owe it to bettors out there to get to those rule changes in the NIT. For those of you who don't know, there's been 4 major changes to the way they'll play the NIT, which could change the totals that are set on these games, how many combined points are scored by teams in these games. We can get into all that. Certainly we're going to try and podcast as much as we can. We're going to go tomorrow, Sunday, with some selections. Could be just myself, could be myself with Rob and Derek joining in at any time. We'll see how that goes. But I'm going to go ahead and get projected lines on all of the first-round games in the NCAA out to people tomorrow. So tune in. We'll keep you posted through our Twitter account as to when we'll be on tomorrow. But like I say, this moves so fast that if you don't hurry up and podcast or go live with the stuff as soon as you think of it, before you know it, the tournament's gone and there's no plays left to be had. So we'll try and get as much out there as we can, be informative for everybody. We know everybody's looking to cash tickets, as are we, so we'll do our best to help you do that.
Guys, thanks for listening. Enjoy Conference Championship Saturday, and we will be back with you in the very near future. For Rob Vino, I'm Rob O'Connor. We'll catch you soon.